Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in. We're very excited to bring this very interesting discussion to you today. It's about disruption management and contingency planning post COVID-19. Um, what we are discussing today is what how things go on post COVID-19. I mean, I'm sure this pandemic has had a very deep impact on the way we live, on the way we work, and how the things are going to be once the pandemic is under control. But at the same time, this has to be taken as an opportunity for us to learn a lot of things on how to do risk assessment, risk management, and how to manage disruptions. We're very excited to have with us today Mr. Riaz Nazarali Chunara. He is the Managing Director of National Institute of Banking and Finance, NIBAF as we call it, a training subsidiary of the State Bank of Pakistan. Mr. Riaz has had 17 years of post qualification experience of working in different capacities in Unilever Pakistan and other multinational organizations in Kenya and Tanzania. He joined State Bank in May 2007 as Director Accounts in State Bank in the State Bank of Pakistan subsidiary, SPP Banking Service Corporation. So thank you very much, Riaz Saab, for joining us. We're very excited to have you with us today. Gentlemen, if you notice, Mr. Riaz is working from his office today, which goes to show that life is not as simple as we feel for regulators, and especially regulator of the banking sector. Thank you very much, Riaz Saab, for joining us today. We're very excited. So over to you.
Thank you, Haroon, and thank you, the team of ACCA, for providing me this opportunity. Indeed, this is it's a very difficult period right now, which we are going through it, and I think the topic is very interesting, which when we call about disruption, and together with the COVID post-COVID 19 contingency plan. So it's a pretty difficult to plan because disruption management itself is very difficult, and then and together with that, the post-COVID is something which is very exciting. So Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Let me start the presentation. So I'll just start and something brief about it, and then we can discuss. So we are talking about disruption management contingency planning in post-COVID 19 world. The the system or the process which I'll follow is basically we'll talk about disruption management first, and COVID-19 is something like a crisis management situation. So together with the disruptive management, there is a crisis management situation. So we'll talk about the crisis management a little bit briefly about crisis management. Then we will move on to that. What is the leadership requirement for such a crisis, which is required under post COVID? How probably will be the world? Obviously, it's very uncertain and very unknown, which will look after COVID-19, and what will be the recovery and contingency post COVID-19 activities. So just a little bit brief about COVID-19 is we actually initially thought that probably it's a break of 2-3 weeks, and this lockdown is going to resolve those things, because there was a 14 days period in which it can be transferred. So once this lockdown will come into effect, things will improve after 3 weeks. But this 3 weeks kept on increasing. I think it started somewhere in third week of March, and now we are in end of April, and now we have already the government has already decided on a lockdown of middle of May, and we don't know now what will happen. So there is a lot of uncertainty. The crowd is it's not something where we can actually make sure that what is going to happen. So we just talk about the disruption. Disruption is a disturbance or problem which interrupts an event, activity, or process. And so disruption management comes into a different forum, which we'll just talk about it. But I think COVID is also one of the disruption which has happened, and it's going to disturb our normal lives, and it's actually disturbing our normal lives in various ways. So before, when we actually just talk about managing disruptions, so we'll just talk about a couple of organizations to understand how disruption actually means and how does it affect. So we first start from Kodak and Nokia. There is something common in these two organizations, and if you look into it, Kodak was one of the top-notch digital the photography company, in which, if you remember, there was a time in which there was the Kodak rolls, the Kodak cameras, the Kodak films was something which was commonly used. But when the digital technology came, the digital photography came, it went down and it never coped up. And so this company had to be bankrupt. Similar thing with Nokia. Nokia is not closed down, but if you look into it, that Nokia started with boots, then it moves to tires, and it moves to mobile phone. There was a time I remember that we used to say that Nokia is a brand. Whenever you talk about a mobile phone, you talk about Nokia. Nokia was one of, just like when we talk about detergents, we talk about Surf or Bright or other things. We talk about Nokia at that time. But then they were not able to keep pace with the smartphone and the smartphone technology. And obviously, now we know the Apple and Samsung took over way ahead. And even when Nokia came back, they were not able to come back in the similar way. They went down. So this is one type of company. There are another type of company where we call Starbucks and IBM. If you look into Starbucks and IBM, what are the common things? Starbucks was actually a simple coffee shop, and then it moved to a customer-facing innovation. And if you now go to Starbucks, Starbucks actually has got an app developed. You can actually order it while you are coming there. So coffee is ready when you reach there. You can get all types of facilities online. So they started innovating on the coffee shop and selling those things electronically. Similar thing, IBM. IBM, if you remember, there was a time in which we used to talk about IBM computers, which were core computers and micro processing chips when the small ones came in, and now they are in artificial intelligence with IBM Watson and a lot of other content development and cloud computing things which IBM has done it. So IBM has successfully managed to develop from a traditional hardware company to a technology-led technology. So if you look into these two examples, what has happened, that if we talk about Starbucks or IBM-like companies, they were successful adapters. And if you talk about Kodak and Nokia, they were actually disrupted companies, which either closed down or went down. Their volumes really went down. So there's another third type when we talk about disruptive, which are actually things like Uber and or Airbnb. And what are common in them? Airbnb actually disturbed the traditional hotel industry. And if you look into the Airbnb model, they actually came up without any brick and mortar. They talked about that there are people who can actually share their extra home space for others, and there are people who actually want it at a cheaper rate. So instead of going to hotels, you can actually share rooms and places with Airbnb. And if you look into it, they created that app. Now in those app, it's not only the app, or it's not only the availability. They actually have got things like credits rating, their previous blogs, records, telling that what the history is. So what happens that when you are visiting, you actually look into all these elements, and a lot of times actually you prefer going to Airbnb, to a more reputable person, probably a five-star person, than going to a traditional hotel industry, and at a much more cheaper rate. Obviously, it's not a traditional lodging, a customized made. It is something which is offered. So the traveling has become much more cheaper. So this is another very good alternative or a technological change, just by creating that concept and creating that app and maintaining that thing. Similar thing with Uber, or here, which is common, is Kareem. The traditional taxi is something which we used to get it, and you used to have to stop it on the road. And now there is something on the app. Again, Uber actually provides that you can actually track the driver. You can see their photographs. You can check their car numbers. You've got the history of drivers, how they were, what the consumer reactions were, what stars do they have. So I think this is how they came up, and obviously it is a much more cheaper, because there are a lot of people who are actually providing their extra. So they are not full-time drivers. That they, like I know a lot of Careem or Uber drivers who have actually leased their cars, and they are actually taking out the lease through some extra time, which they are putting up and taking out the lease. So this is something which becomes a win-win situation to both of them, the providers as well as to the takers. So we call that disruptors. So I think it's very important that we should understand that, out of the three, what do we want to become? Do we want to become a disruptive company to get out? Do you want to become a successful adapter so that we continue and we change ourselves? Or you want to become a disruptor, which basically with a completely new situation? If you look into the COVID situation, it's similar. I think these are some of the examples which actually never protected. Kodak, we mentioned about Kodak, we mentioned about Nokia, we mentioned about Okay, now Blockbuster is another one which was actually the video stores and the video on demand, but they never talked about that, how this online streaming is going to change. And if you look into the Netflix and Disney and all those things, the way they came up, this is something which is new, which gives more alternatives, more options at a much more cheaper rate. Similar thing is with BlackBerry. They never actually uh, uh, went into a bigger touch screens, and they concentrated on their keypads, which I think was their core. And finally, because they took it over, the technology changed a lot. So what was common in them, that most of these companies were aware that there is a disruption which was going to take place. So it's not that they were not aware that what is going to happen, but they never figured it out that it's going to happen in such a way. They still felt that, this is the core business, concentrate on the core activities, and somehow we'll come out of it and our products will still survive. But they never realized that this disruption, this is actually a disruption which is going to change the whole life of people. So that's why most of these people are now out of the business. So in the current COVID situation, if you look into it, there are a lot of things happening. There are a lot of things which are temporary in nature. There are a lot of things which will become permanent. There are a lot of organizations which actually kept on changing their businesses as well. So if you look into it, video conferencing meeting applications were not that common. Now you can look into the share prices of Zoom and WebEx. Zooming, they're actually going up like anything, and their businesses are becoming very common. So nobody used these types of meetings so frequent and so often as what we are using now. E-commerce related business, people normally prefer to have things at home. So this is really picking up now. People are coming up with more innovations in this, including if you look into the Raz, which is actually part of Alibaba Group. So they are offering a lot of things which they are trying to cover through e-commerce as well at a discounted rate. So in the medical products, you can see there are some industries which actually converted themselves. I know a couple of in Germany, there was a motor vehicle which was generating motor vehicle parts. They actually started preparing the ventilators. So I think this is something which they come up with an innovative things. There are a lot of people who were actually dealing with clothes or things like that. They started preparing surgical masks. So a lot of people actually now then they worked on disinfectant gates, which is very commonly used nowadays in a lot of things. So a lot of people actually change themselves very quickly so that they can adapt. They know that nobody is going to buy cars. The car sales are going to go down. So what they did, they actually changed themselves, amended themselves, changed their business. Similar cases with pharmaceutical companies, especially the people who are working on the drugs and the vaccines. So they are working very so that they can become the first mover, and they can actually capitalize on the first mover. If you look into it, the Netflix, Disney, and the other online streaming are really jumping. It has gone 5 times, 6 times more than what it was earlier, and it's still growing. So if you look into the internet service providers and mobile companies, probably everybody wants to improve these services, because when you work from home, this is something which you want to have. And I know a lot of people who have actually gone for a backup also. So they earlier had one service provider, now they've got two service providers. So workplaces is something which actually is changing. So you have to keep a social distance. You have to keep things. So your way of working, and if you look into the shops and everything, they've made those circles so that you don't go closer to each other. You maintain the social distance. So there are a lot of changes which are happening in the teaching and testing methodologies. A lot of our schools were not prepared. But now you can see that, based on what is going on now, schools are getting prepared. for these types of things. And simply, I'll tell you one thing. One of the universities I know now, you see, the online testing is something which was very. They were saying that it's very difficult to manage, but nowadays they're using artificial intelligence to make sure that those testing are performed through various ways. They actually check you 360 degrees, and they keep your eyes, monitoring your eyes. And if there's anything, your artificial intelligence warns you that there's something which is wrong, which is going on. So your concentration has to be on the screen, so that you can give the tests and all those things. And then obviously, with the multiple questions coming together, it's very difficult. So social media and gaming is another thing which is kept on coming up. E-learning medium like this webinars we are having now are becoming more common than it was. So there are certain things which will become part of a culture. So when we talk about a culture, this can result into various things which will actually, if you relate after 10, 20 years, we'll relate that, COVID happened and that's why this business actually changed. So these are examples of some disruptions which can actually happen with the COVID. But these are some physical things which we are watching. There are a lot of things which behind which the organizations are doing. So just give you one example, like the ANT Financial Services, Alipay, what they are doing, and a lot of other organizations are all doing in e-commerce industry. They actually assign scores of individual businesses. They provide that platform. Now what they are doing is they are actually monitoring the behaviors, and with the big data, they're actually using the big data, what exactly you are doing, what you are searching, and based on your search they're coming up with alternatives and products. So giving you an example, if somebody took a photograph of a very nice fancy motorcycle, next day you get something that these are you inform the company who are providing these fancy bikes, that what are the, and then you can, the banking industry come up with the payment plans, that this is available at this price, and we are going to give you, based on your credit scores and history, these things. So this is completely innovative and new things of working what we are not currently using. So now we're coming, after the disruption, we are coming now straight to the COVID situation, which is actually a crisis situation. A very key thing, wherever there is a crisis situation, teaming is very important. Now, this is something which Edmondson of Harvard Business School has actually given the concept of teaming. Teaming is teamwork on the fly, coordinating, collaborating across boundaries without luxury of stable team structures. Now this is something which is happening, that you don't have you don't, like, just like in this current situation, we cannot, a lot of people are working on videos or from home, so we don't have a proper structure, team structure, or a team meeting, but we still have to work and collaborate with each other in various ways. This is also a very complex and unpredictable situation. So we don't know what is going to happen, how long it's going to take, and what will be the post situation. So it's not something. So some completely unpredictable. So I think what the characteristics we should be looking at, if we look at the COVID situation, it's a technically complex issue. We have got resource constraints. Obviously, we have got limited resources which can be allocated, and nowadays, a lot of people who cannot make money, earn money, or their income is gone down. So that's another thing which is coming in. Managerially, it's becoming difficult because you don't have the normal hierarchy structure or the people who are face to face. Then it's an emotionally charged. A lot of people have got problems at home as well as working, because initially you enjoy probably sitting at home, but then you realize that it's not that easy to work from home as well. So it's politically sensitive, and there is media everywhere now. So if something happens, then media is always there to cover it up. So it's a very hyped media thing. So what is required in that? I think there are a couple of things which needs to be focused. So actually, first is you should have a team in that. So you have to have a team which can actually have interaction and give you some solutions to solve these issues. But when we talk about team, not necessarily in this situation, actually probably require team which has got expertise from across the boundaries. So you can, like, if you are in a like, we are in a training industry, so we tie it up with other trainers, what they are doing, how they are doing, and how they are working. So we have to go outside the boundaries which we are not normally doing it. So, and you have to keep on experimenting and innovate so that you can come up with solutions. So there are normally three areas of the arenas of action. like it can be different from country perspective, it can be different from individual perspective, but generally there is actually one person who is actually getting affected, the other person which provides you technical support and technical background, and the third is the executives, is the management, is the government who actually works on those things. So these are the three people who work. What is more important at this time is to team up, to survive, innovative, and support. So this is the only way we can actually come out of these things. So what is more important in this situation now is you have to have an interactive, agile, and problem solving cases. There are a lot of things. This crisis situation has happened a lot of times, and we'll talk about some of the examples of those things. But what is more important, that you have to establish your goals, which is very, very critical. So once you have established your goals and priorities based on the situation you describe, and you have to be creative, you have to develop options. And analytical is another tool where you actually predict a lot of things, what can happen, is very critical to decide on which are the options, which are the best cost of options, and then the administration, how those things are going to be managed. So I think it's a very good quote by John Dewey, which says, "A problem well put is half solved." So let's talk about a normal circumstances. If you look into the normal circumstances, success in crisis depends upon an innovative logic. But in the normal circumstances, you're looking at you prescribe and control. But in this thing, actually, you cannot prescribe because you don't know. So you have to have an enabling environment, and you have to keep on learning what is happening in the world, and how we can change, how we can evolve. So in this novel circumstances of COVID, we have to have an innovative logic instead of a management logic. So in the management logic, it's assume predictability. You have certain basis of predictability. Innovative, actually, you have to assume uncertainty. It's very difficult to predict, so you know that you don't know what's going to happen, but you still have to make some assumptions and work on it. So in normal course of business, there are simple interdependencies. In this situation, we have got a complex interdependencies. So in normal circumstances, we emphasize on efficiency, and now actually we are doing experimentations. So this is something which comes out. So in normal cases, we have got a clear shared criteria, and in this case, now we are talking about a multiple competing criteria, and we have to keep on trying to make sure that we succeed. Obviously, we have to accept the failures as well in that. In the normal circumstances, you have got a hierarchical command, and this is now we are talking about distributed teaming, where actually people are not sitting at the same floor, but we still have to work under the situation. So in the normal circumstances, we insist on adherence to the plan. But in these circumstances, we actually, a lot of cases, we engage experts, and we come out of it and let the experts determine those things. So experts can be internal, external, and it can be innovative as well. Right. So what is more critical once you have planned is execution. Execution is something which you are planning, and you are planning something which is unknown, which can be across boundaries, which may require different expertise. It doesn't have a fixed set of deliverables, and you can come up with something which is more innovative. And based on your learning, you can create that acting. So this is actually one of the most difficult thing when you're talking about execution, because you are trying to prepare something in the short run, what is going to happen now and what's going to happen in the post-COVID situation. So there are certain elements which needs to be considered when we talk about it to be successful. First is we should share the purpose and compelling visions, which is very, very important. Then teaming across expertise boundaries is because, as I told you, that when you in such a situation, it's not necessarily that you can come up with internal people. You probably will have to look out that, like, I'll give you an example. Right now we are using one type of video conferencing, maybe other people are using others. So just share, team across, know what is happening in the market, so at least you can have joint things together where you can share and you can work with them. Listening to ideas is very important, that it can be formal, it can be informal. And one thing is that you should be resilient. Resilience is very important, that because you will fail, there are a lot of times you'll fail, but once you fail, you have to come up and you have to be persistent, so that you are positive instead of just. And a lot of people who have come out of crisis were persistent, which is very, very critical and core. So discipline is something which is very much revived, and now uh, there's a culture of innovation which is very important. So when we talk about a culture of innovation, we talk about a chaotic environment, a playful environment, where actually we talk about broad thinking, and we talk about tolerance of failure, which is very normal. But in such this situation, if we are chaotic, we can be chaotic, but we have to be focused. So we can be playful, but we still have to be disciplined. So we can talk about broad boundary spanners, where you can think anything, you can have a brainstorming, but you still have to value deep expertise, so that you have to still listen to what the experts are saying. Then if you can tolerate failures, you can, but you still have to promote the high standards. So this is very required. All these things are required, that the enabling leadership actually set directions and listen to the people. So communication is another thing which is very, very critical. How the leaders communicate, and this is something which can be seen, that you have to be brutally honest. You have to talk about the facts instead of sugarcoating it. You should talk about the facts. The other thing is, you have to give an hope. You cannot lose, or you have to be optimistic, which is very, very critical. And you have to offer your empathy to the people who are getting affected, either people who are working for home, or either the people who actually are in contact with patients directly or indirectly with COVID. So a very good saying. Now this is by Guinea Rometty, the CEO of IBM, but it was also said by Napoleon. A leader's job is to paint reality and give hope. So I think, which is a very good thing, that you actually paint, don't sugarcoat it, paint it what the reality is, but you have to give that positivity, which we talked about, is very, very important. So we talk about the survival. So you can see now there are a lot of industries which are facing a lot of problems. I don't know what will happen to the We don't know what will happen to the restaurants, the hotels, how much they can sustain, the airlines, including the paramedics. Your paramedics may come under a lot of stress situation. They are already in the stress situation in the Western world, where they also are getting corona, and they are also getting affected, and they still have to work, they still have to survive. And a lot of areas, they never had the proper gears also, because if the number goes up, then you are not prepared. So this is something, what the stamina is very important. So this is a situation where the malls are closed, enterprises are closed, businesses are closed. So we are not sure that what's going to happen and how long it's going to happen. But the future productivity and success will depend on the flexibility planning. But we must know that we have to think about options and contingencies, which is very, very core and important at this stage of time. So if we talk about the recovery and the contingency for the post-COVID activities, this is something which we should consider. Is we have to set our goals. So we have to plan for the scenario. I think if we are looking into it, we plan for the scenario from the business perspective, from the workplace perspective, from how we can resume. And you have to be prepared as well, that in case if the second wave come in after it subsidizes and then it comes back again, what are we going to do. So I think these we should cover these things, elements in that. And we talk about when we talk about the preparation of the business in the post pandemic world, we actually should look into what position we can obtain after the this situation. We actually can also how we can bounce back, how we can come back. We have to look into the changes which are going to happen and our perspective. And obviously we'll have to look for new projects, new things. Some things we can come up now, some things we can come up later, but this is very important and very critical, and how we are prepared to execute these plans. So these are just a little bit of briefs about this, and then we'll come to the questions, and then you can discuss few examples of these situations, the crisis situations, and we can link it with our current situations. Over to Harun.
Thank you very Thank you very much, Mr. Raz. I think this was fantastic. This was very, very engaging. and I couldn't get my eyes off the slides that you were showing. I think it's very, very clear. Our way of working, if you continue to work the way you used to, I think you are on the wrong track. You have to adapt. The leaders have to adapt. The whole course of business has to change. People who are following the plan right now that they had set for themselves pre-COVID, they have to go back to the drawing board. They have to change their plans, and they have to come up with new remodeled plans. If they are not adapting themselves to this new situation, they will very soon be out of business. I see many telecom companies getting into action. I see pharmaceutical companies getting into action. But of course, times are tough for Mr. Raz, like you said, for the airline industry, for the tourism industry, for restaurants, and unless these businesses are geared up to innovate, to change the culture, I think it is going to be a bit difficult for them to continue. But taking our conversation now to the international arena, the international perspective, we have seen disruptions, or we have seen unfortunate events happening in different parts of the world. Um, and we have seen different heads of states or leaders reacting differently to those situations. Some very positive and leaving a very, very sound, impact of their personality and all, and others not very positive. Without going into politics, without siding with any one of them, um, I was reading a report from BBC the other day, and this report was about how the New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, her swift reaction to the Christchurch shooting, and then she emerged as one of the best leaders in the world. Similarly, South Korean President Moon Jae-in communicated coronavirus information early and consistently. So my question to you, Riaz, is that how important are, number one, truthfulness on part of a leader? How important is truthfulness? Number two, agility, and number three, consistency in messaging that goes out on part of the leader during times of crisis. So your response, sir.
Thanks, Arun, for a very good, nice question. I think it's very important. We need to understand that in this time, communication by leaders is very, very critical. And it all depends upon how they communicate. You gave some examples, and we can elaborate on those examples as well. And there is a very good principle which Arjen Boyne has given about how they should act. And he is actually a political scientist, and he wrote a book, "The Politics of Crisis Management." And he studied, when he wrote these books, he studied a lot of events like 9/11, like various international issues which has happened, and based on that they actually spelled out that what is required. Now, before going into the details, I think the examples you gave were very right. So if we talk about Korea, what happened in Korea actually, when they started with this thing, they started preparing for the COVID situation long time before. They had some 100,000 testing capacity on a daily basis. They actually built up on how they are going to work. Now, they earlier had SARS, so they know how to communicate to the people. Communication candid is very, very important. So what is more important, that this is the way the president actually informed them that this is a crisis, there is a national emergency which is going to come in, and people will have to be prepared for this, and what are the required precautions to be taken by individuals. Now, this was relayed through substations, through television, through various modes, to make sure that they're properly and you can see now South Korea is one of the advanced countries which are being considered as an example. If you need to reach a COVID situation, it's one of the country where they have actually largely opened their all their work and businesses. They prepared for the medical exigencies, and I think it's very important when you talk about Jacinda, the Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. If you look into it, what happened, that when this issue was going on, when the case There's a firing going on. It was uncertain. She came immediately to the media, and she talked about that. That whatever happens, these people who are being killed, who are the targets. Actually, either they are migrants or they are people, they're refugees. They still prefer to stay in New Zealand, and they are us. And actually, the people who are the perpetrators who had actually attacked are not us. So I think she was very candid and clear what expectations are, which is very, very important. As I told you earlier, and this is what Arjan also talked about, that you don't sugarcoat it. You tell the facts, and you beat about the bush. Now she came about and she said that these are uncertain. I don't know what has happened. What are the number of casualties? So we are still working. We are still working with the law enforcement. And what is very important is, so you have told the purpose, which is actually, which Arjan said is purpose, and you have to have a sense of purpose. And I think the finally what the message she gave is what the individual should do, what the people should do to support. So she mentioned that you have to keep a lookout. You should watch out instead of going to those areas, and you have to stay indoors for some time, at least till the time things stabilizes and we come to know what exactly happened. So if you look into the speech of South Korean president, he also did the same thing. He actually informed earlier what the realities were, then didn't sugarcoat it at all. Tell you the fact, kept it positive, so that you have to keep it that we'll come out of this thing. And lastly, I think then you actually there is a purpose. We are there, and what the people are supposed to do. That communication is very important. So I think these examples which you are giving are following the principles which Arjan gave it to us. I'll give you another example of chili mining. Now, chili mining was something where, if you look into it, that there was a crisis situation in which there were miners who were stuck some 2,000 feet below, and you never know what was happen. What the president gave the statement was that we will get those people dead or alive uh, without leaving any expense. So basically, we not look at expense, but we'll do it. So what the person was trying to explain is that we are going to do whatever is required. And we'll get them, either it's dead or alive. And that situation, it was next to impossible that they are going to get it. And if you look into, and then what he did, he actually placed a team, a very good team, a technical team of engineers to make sure. So basically, the initial was communication. That the next thing was team who were persistent. Till 16 days, there was no progress, and they were not even sure that if they are alive, and they were finding it very difficult unless when they digged one of the pipes, there was a painted done. So they understood that no, this painting is done by somebody. That means people are alive, and that's how that triggered. And they were, I think, it took something like 90 days. And what was more important for them, that as soon as they get a hold of them, they have to give them food, because without food they will die, because it's not that easy to reach 2,000 feet straight away. So they built up a capsule. They started giving food from that capsule. They actually expanded that capsule, and then they worked out. So if you look into it, this is something which is very much required from our leadership. Now, internationally, there are certain leaders who have been proactive, and you can comment on certain leaders who have proactively. Just we mentioned about the South Korean president, and a lot of other leaders have actually proactively maintained it. And the other people have not been candid. They have been sugarcoating it. They have been underestimating it, and so it's not communicated properly. So once that's not done, that's one of the issue which actually people face. So I think this is very, very important. Communication is very, very important at this stage of time, and you have to give the information at the right time. So if you delay those things, then obviously there is already a chaotic situation which is going on. So these things are very important to follow for any leader. Either it's an individual basis or on a countrywide basis. Yes, Arun.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Riaz. I think another interesting thing to quote would be, from the American president who said, if you consume antiseptics and ultraviolet or, infrared light or something. And look at how the world reacted to these comments. I think these situations, I feel require very judged, analyzed, specific response, showing concern, showing truthfulness, and not making a comment from left to right. I think that's an example, in its place, very well, a good example to be quoted in this case, that how the leaders in such a situation, what an important role they have to play. So I think that's very interesting, and a good analysis by yourself, sir. um, I will like all the participants to be reminded that if you want to ask any questions, we are getting comments and questions, but if you have any questions, comments to ask, please type them in now. And as we go along, after we've concluded some of these questions, we go to the questions from the audience also. So we have time for that. But please do keep your comments and questions flowing in. Riaz Saab, my next question to you is around the culture of innovation. I mean, you just talked about how organizations need to be innovative. You can either be a disruptor, be disrupted, or be adaptive to disruptions. I think that's a very well I mean, a very well placed definition of the three options that you may have. But being innovative, it is not as easy. I mean, to have a culture of innovation within the organization, innovative ideas coming in, not just from the top, but from the bottom up as well. So how can companies develop this culture of innovation, or encouraging their employees to speak up and be innovative? How can that confidence be instilled within the team members? And I'm particularly asking because a lot of our members, who are in accounting and finance roles, they have a very important role to play. They have a lot of information based on which they can advise the senior management on what initiatives to take, on how to become innovative, on how to control damage, right? So from that perspective, how can organizations have a culture of innovation completely set in? I mean, how to have that confidence within employees?
Right. Thanks, Arun. I think I'll start with one of the Japanese when they started working on quality. If you look into it, I think in the 40s, 50s, the Japanese were like we now used to call Chinese, that this is a Chinese product. It's not going to work half of the time. So that's the same thing with Japan. Japan, it was in 40s and 50s. Now, how did they change? I think they started working on total quality system. If you remember, there's a very common word of Kaizen, continuous improvement, and continuous innovation, which is very important. If you look into their cultures, they actually brought in teams. They brought in encouraged ideas from all angles, and a lot of examples were actually that a lot of ideas can be come up with factory floors. Now, factory workers actually may have an idea, but is the management willing to listen to it? So it's very important that we have to encourage this culture of having that ideas can come, and we have to set those things. But there are certain steps which is required to be followed. So we're talking about the Japanese. What they did were what they clear actually have goal settings. They were aware that what goals they have to see do, and then they assigned these goals to the teams, to the challenges, that this is your work and this is what you have to have perform. What was more important is an open communication. One of the things which is lacking in a lot of organization is an open communication system between cross function. It's not something that you are a CEO, so a worker cannot talk with you. So if your doors are open, a worker can come in and give you a comment. So I think this is something which is actually encouraging when we talked about a total quality management system or a Japanese management system. So feedback were actually taken very frequently. They were talking about that, so give constructive and supportive feedback. Now, this also happens that whenever the leader is also giving feedback, they have to make sure that they should give feedback, and they should give some constructive and supportive feedback. So instead of discouraging those things, they have to think about and be supportive of the ideas. Because you see a lot of brainstorming ideas. I'll just give you an example of Unilever. Unilever, let's say they come up with 10 new products, 15 new products. only 2 product will work, 3 product will work. That doesn't mean that they stop that innovation. They stop launching products because they know that out of the 2 3 products which is going to work, it's going to take them, through in terms of profit. So I think this is very very important, that we have to be persistent and we have to accept that failures can be there. So the one of the important thing was that, if there are some ideas which were basically practical and implementable, then Japanese used to actually give them reward also. So I think reward is another element, that, if people are giving ideas, your performance systems, your reward systems should be such that you should be encouraging them. One more critical thing which is very important, especially in our organization types of organization, is bureaucracy. So I think the bureaucracy has to be absent if you have to have an innovative culture. And I think it's very very important that we have to support each other. We are different teams, different areas where we work together. So I think this is very very important. And I again will quote one of the example of Unilever. We used to have one management session once you rise in ladders, in which, you have got people from commercial, marketing, technical, HR, pooling together and discussing actually live issues of Unilever which they were facing in different areas, and coming up with the idea. So we were formed in one team in which there was one technical guy, one HR guy, one commercial guy, one marketing guy. And then, you were giving one day a problem related to HR, one day related to technical. So when you pool up, you can come up with more creative ideas and better things, which is out of box solution. So it's very very important. The other thing is diversity in nowadays is very important, that you should not have a set of people. So you need a diverse background, groups to work on, so they can add up different things. And then once you have got a communication acceptance, it's going to work. So all these things putting together will inshallah encourage the creative thinking or the innovation. Yes.
Thank you. There's some very interesting questions coming in, but I think we'll go to the audience questions in a bit. My next question to you, Mr. Riaz, is about the cost of innovation, the risk. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. You just mentioned that Unilever used to have, you know, tens and twenties of products being innovated, but probably only one or two will work. So there's a cost attached to it. And the pressure on the management always is from the stakeholders. The pressure always is to have better efficiency, to pay back more, etc. And there is this tendency of senior management to be risk averse also, in order to meet stakeholder expectations of, of continuous revenue streams and all. Uh, how can leaders, what do you think, how can leaders balance between the two? So going innovative rather than sticking to the plan. How can leaders have a balance between the two, and they can manage the innovation risk, as we call it? So what is your
That's
opinion?
right. So I think I'll just again go with an example, and then we'll try and relate that. I remember there was a time in which Unilever, in when I was there, they were expanding. They were coming up with new products. They came up with downward integration, upward integration, all types of new products coming in. They were encouraging. And after some time, actually, Unilever then brought a CEO who was actually expert in consolidation. Because you see, there was a guy who was actually very creative, but then you have to look into the financial feasibility and benefits, and then come out and come with the solutions that now these are workable, close down which is not going to work, and these are the projects which will keep on going. So it's more of a consolidation. So what is more important? Risk management has been very very important, especially after the global financial crisis. I think this is something which we have been working. But when we talk about a crisis situation, when we talk about the situation which we are facing now with regard to economy, you don't know what's going to this crisis, this financial crisis is going to end as well. So I think it's very very important that risk management is done. It has to be done nowadays. If you look into it, a lot of financial stress management, stress testing, and the other disclosures, and expected credit loss models, and all those things have been worked out to make sure that these are covered. But these things all came about after the global financial crisis. Risk management model is very very critical. It's very very important, as we realize that if we don't have that, then we don't have a buffer. So if we, like, it's just like suspensions. that if you go to a speed breaker and you don't have suspension, you things will break, because your car will break. There are a lot of parts which will break then again. So risk management is very, very important. Obviously, it's considered, which is very, very critical. But then we have to understand that whatever we are doing, what are the limitations of that model, whatever we are working with. I think this is very, very important. You have to expect what is unexpected. I think this is something you cannot expect. So you have to be sure that whatever will happen, it will be happen. So you have to face it, but then you have to still mitigate it based on what is known as risk appetite. I think risk appetite is very important, that you can take that risk where which you think you can absorb. So everybody has got a different appetite, so everybody can absorb differently, but you have to take the risk, keeping in mind your risk appetite, your flexibility, your innovative capabilities. And I think it's very, very important that you come up with something that, even if you fail, that at least you have made an effort. But again, you have to keep on trying and making use. What is more important, that you have to understand what your users are, what your product can be used for. And I think nowadays there people are coming up with more innovative ideas of testing the innovation. I'll just give you an example of like when we were talking about a lot of digital payments that which are coming in the market. We talked about as sandboxing. So sandboxing is something where actually something is parked, you test it in a control environment, and once you are okay, you bring it live. So in sandboxing, you have got extra precautions, extra measures to do it. So probably we have to be more innovative, even thinking of implementing those things based on our risk appetite. I think this is something which I like to add. Yes, sir.
True, true. Thank you very much. I think there were two very interesting questions put up by to the participants. The first one is about it's a very detailed question, and I think require a more detailed answer. It's saying, what is the situation of the economy now in Pakistan, and how much time is required to stabilize it? And I think it's a huge question to ask in a very short session, about an hour and a half. But
That's
Mr.
true.
Riaz, I would appreciate if you could mention the initiatives. I mean, before the session, we were talking about some of the initiatives that the state bank has taken. And had the state bank not taken those initiatives, the banking channel, the banking circle would have, gone haywire and would have been affected very badly. So I'll appreciate if you can mention some of those as well. And then,
Right.
what lies ahead economy wise.
Right. Okay, I think one thing we have to be clear, that initially when we talk about such a crisis, we were talking about a couple of weeks, not probably about months, and maybe more than when we talk, we probably maybe talking about months or maybe years, because we actually thought that we'll do that lockdown, it'll be effective, maybe things will be under control after some time. So if you look at the State Bank started with a lot of things. First of all, they have to make sure that when there is a crisis, the people jobs are safe, because if they lose the jobs, their businesses will lose. So we'll have to somehow support them. So that's why we came up with zero financing, refinance. Probably banks are charging a little bit on top of it, covering their margin, but State Bank is providing them free financing, so far as for business carrying, for essential items, like if they are having some pandemic related equipments, then we are supporting them, and to pay the salaries of their staff. The second thing is, we have to understand that in this time, there are a lot of people who will not be able to pay off their debt. So debt restructuring was very, very important. Obviously, State Bank has got a prudential regulations under the cover. So a lot of relaxation we're giving in terms of debt servicing, debts restructuring, including credit cards and other people who are facing those problems. So besides the refinancing facilities and all those things, we worked a lot on the digital payments as well. One of the things what we did is that we provided, because right now when we are saying there is a risk, including in the banknotes. So what we did was, we promoted digital services, digital payments, and right now there's free of cost digital transfers within any banks, within any place, whatever you transfer, it is free of cost transfer of money. So that's something which we provided, so that people start getting into the habits of electronic transfer rather than physically coming to the branches. But we have to understand that a lot of things belong to our culture and our environment. I think these are a lot of steps which we took it initially, and which are still continuing. What is more important is, I think, if you look into the government element and our element, now people are talking that this problem actually it was not for weeks. This may take months, and this may take probably years also. um, we are obviously, everybody's optimistic that either the drug or the vaccine will come in very soon, and probably, this right now the chaotic position will improve after some time, and people will come back. But obviously, we have to prepare a contingency plan which actually will work towards long-term sustainability of those things. So it's a very difficult time. It's a very difficult time to predict, because what we cannot predict, something which can be sorted within the next 1 or 2 weeks, something which may take even 1 or 2 years. So it's very difficult to predict at this stage of time. But obviously, State Bank itself has got a very innovative and management, always looking for options, always looking for things based on the time, coming up with things. But it's more important that we have to understand that we are only looking after the banking sector. We are already talking with the banking sector. We have already told them not to declare any dividends anymore, at least for the 2 quarters, so that their reserves and all those things are built up to take care of these things. um, but things you never know that what's going to happen. What is more important is for the businesses, because you see the businesses will have to work around, like there's a lot of SOPs which the governments are trying to make. It is becoming difficult, it's becoming more costly for them to work with, but they'll have to somehow talk about survival at this time. It's very, very important to survive at this time. So once you survive, and once you have got plans, then obviously you can come up very good and very well if you survive this place, and then you come up with the post COVID situation. So your planning is very, very important. You have to be innovative. As I told you, there are a lot of businesses who have actually started innovating products. A lot of people who are not just making sanitizers have started making sanitizers. And as I told you that, like in Germany, there's a motor vehicle company which was making motor vehicle parts, are now making ventilators. So I think you have to come up, whatever based on your niche, you have to come up with things. Now this is something which we cannot change the whole business environment, but this is something which we have to understand within our area of influence, wherever we can influence, how much we can change, how far we can be more innovative, and how far we can work, so that in the post COVID situation, or even if it prolongs, then what the situations are, you set your goals, you set those things right, and then you can work accordingly. Yes, sir.
Yes, very pertinent, and I can tell you, I know textile factories in Faisalabad who have now started manufacturing masks and body suits rather than their usual products. So that is adaptation. That is adapting to the needs of the time. Um, Another very interesting question by Usman Iftikhar, and he looks like a student of accounting and finance. But I'm going to twist the question a bit. Accounting and finance professionals, as finance business partners, not as bookkeepers, but as finance business partners. What is their responsibility? How is this an opportunity for them? How can they prove their worth to an organization? What is your opinion on this, and what value can they add in such difficult times?
So I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is the personal development, and one is the organization. I think finance professionals are all key, because when we talk about scenario building, when you talk about financial support, we can be part of a technical team which can actually support them in a lot of ways, giving them options, areas where they can look into. Because I believe the financial professional understand the cost structures, the revenue structures in a much more better way than what a normal technical or a marketing person understands. So it's very critical for the finance person to play its role. The other thing is, I think personal development is also very, very critical. This is a time in which a lot of people were saying that we are very busy, we cannot work with. I think this is a very good time. Like you are having these sessions, and I can see a lot of institutions are now offering either free or very nominal rates charges. Besides that, you can actually look into the certifications if you have time. So personal growth, personal development, what like there this out of the seven principle, there is something which we call it sharpening the your skills. So I think which is very, very important at this time, that you work on sharpening the skills, you learn new things, and once you learn new things, I'm sure that you're going to apply those things, and you'll be in a better position out of it, rather than just wasting, or probably, as one of the surveys actually recently conducted said, that the domestic violence and the disputes between families have now increased. So instead of doing concentrating on those, work on more productive things. I know it's a very challenging environment right now. Working at home is also very difficult, because you've got children, you've got people working, you've got a lot of noises, you've got all types of problems, but you still have to work and survive. So I think this is something individuals will have to come up with more innovative ideas to work around these things.
Very interesting. You pointed out, what's happening with the home government currently, as in there is a
Right.
crisis in the home government as well at the moment, which needs to be arrested. It's a very interesting and important question by Rabia Ajmal, and the question is about specialized banks. So Rabia is asking if you can highlight the challenges that the specialized banks are facing. So, for example, agriculture finance providers, etc. In the current scenario with limited digital banking facilities, because even the customers of such banks do not have means that encourage online and digital banking. So, microfinance banks, or let me say, agricultural bank, as you pointed out. What are the challenges that they are facing right now?
I think what is more important is initially, as I told you, that we even now, if you look into it, we are expecting that this is a temporary phenomena. And if it is a temporary phenomena, what happens that there is probably you already have a Ramzan break in which your efficiency goes down, and people were expecting that it's going to prolong a little bit, and then we are going to be back to normal. I think this is one scenario which we were all forecasting earlier, that it's going to be a couple of weeks. Hopefully, it will be a couple of weeks. We hope that, but obviously, we have to be prepared that if it prolongs, if the second waves come in, then we have to be more prepared. And if you look into the numbers are actually not going down; they are still going up. Yes, the people who are getting cured are also going up, and we still have limited testing capacity, so we are not sure that the numbers are accurate and how far they are accurate as well. But I think government is taking a lot of actions to lock down those areas where the cases are more, so that it's so whatever the government can do within their resources, they're trying to make some efforts in this regard. Now, with regard to the specialized banks, I think it's very important that obviously, if they have to start planning that we have to probably restart that business again, what are the things we have to do under the current situation. So I think this is something we have to start planning, that whenever, suppose if things become normal. Because if you talk about agriculture products, if you talk about microfinance, everything is there. The farms are still there, the businesses are still there, the SME is still there, the need is still there. Nothing has changed. So it's not going to change. But what we have to do is how we are going to behave, how we are going to work around, so that we are not affected. Because I'll tell you, a lot of people actually who never took precaution, they actually got corona within their own environment, and then suddenly they had to shut down their factories, and even if it was operating. So I think if you run into that situation, you are in a more worse situation. So I think it's better that you tell your people how to behave, how to work, how to keep those things, and you develop those things. This is very important, because as I told you, that there are two things. One is your area of influence, and so whatever your area of influence is, you have to make an effort that these things are actually done. Either it is your organization, either it is your family, or it is your friends. So I think this is something which we have to keep on influencing them, that they follow the norms which the government is setting for us. So it's very, very important, I think, that the management they'll have to come up with a contingency plan, that in case if it's not a short term thing and it prolongs, then what next, how they are going to come back. because the businesses are still there, the specialized businesses still will still be there, because people will still need food, it will still need and things probably, it may not be normal, but it may be working towards normal. So I think this is something which we have to start preparing for.
Okay, Mr. Riaz, let me take you back to one of your slides where you were discussing management logic versus innovative
Yeah.
logic. My question to you was that um, the transition between these two, and of course, when we say adapting, the organizations need to adapt. They have to shift from management logic to innovative logic in situations like these, and do a lot of experimentation, etc. Um, should this transition between the two logics be very, very quick, rapid, immediate, noticeable, or should it be very, very smooth, phased out, inconspicuous? Competitors should not notice anything happening. The it should be seamless to the stakeholders. What do you think is better? Be agile and very, very quickly react very quickly, or keep it very, very smooth and take time in switching to another management model?
Okay, the management logic was actually the normal course of business which happens in a crisis situation, and especially a crisis situation which we are in right now. We have to actually move immediately or noticeably into the innovative logic mode straight away, because I think that's what the survival is for time being. Obviously, this is what is required in a crisis situation. That doesn't mean that crisis situation will remain throughout. So, obviously, we have to come back to the same managerial position, which the good practices are to be followed to mitigate our risk, to manage our businesses. But at this stage of time of crisis, till the time crisis continues, we should move to innovative logic so that we can work and we can think, we can create more innovations. We have to accept failures also. We have to mitigate risk, and this it's a matter of survival, not only survival, but to progress after it, because there may be a lot of organization, a lot of restaurants or whatever, who cannot sustain these types of things. There can be a lot of things who will sustain. So even in restaurants, people have started doing home delivery, and now they are coming up with more innovative ideas in home delivery, including applications, including use of apps also. So I think, this, you have to keep on changing, look out in the market, what things are, what you can grow, and work as a teaming, work in collaboration with others, so that, in the mutual interest we can work. It's very, very important and critical at this stage of time.
Thank you very much. I very, I just recalled a situation, an example in Lahore, where one of the famous departmental stores all of a sudden in the morning caught fire, and it was all gutted down. There was one decision that the senior management of the departmental store took, and that was that they're not going to fire any single individual in this time of crisis. And you know, to everybody's surprise, what happened was that the workforce got together and they decided that, look, our showroom is gutted down. We will not have walk-in customers. We will start doing home deliveries, and that was the time when home deliveries was not a concept very commonly known. But I can tell you, in about 3 or 4 months' time, when the departmental store got back on its feet, during those 3 or 4 months, each and every employee of that departmental store was doing home deliveries, and they sustained this period of crisis very, very, efficiently and easily. And that's probably a very nice example of how employees can contribute back, support the management, the senior management, and how senior management can be supportive of their employees also, and lead the way through this time of crisis.
So that
I think that's sure.
Right. So I think, what you're mentioning is adaptability is very, very core and critical,
True.
which you have to keep on changing. You have to adapt to those things. So instead of closing down now, if you look into the 80/20 principle also, a lot of things, whenever things happen, it happens. If an accident happens, it happens. But a lot of things matters actually. The 80% of the things happens what your reaction is, how you react to it, what actions do you take after that. So this is something which is very normal. Like there was an example that if something broke down and you started firing your wife or your kid, and then you went late to the school, and by the time, so happened something happened which was not controllable, but then afterwards everything was controllable. But if you kept in the same mood, same emotions, then everything will be out of your control, and it will be difficult to manage. So what is more important, that you still have a lot of things, how you are going to react and what you're going to act. So don't become a
True. Very
disruptive company to get out of the business. Become the adapters so that you can work with them.
true. I think fantastic conversation, and I think there'll be messages for a lot of people coming from different sectors, coming from different types of industries and businesses. There'll be a lot of messages from your discussion, Mr. Riaz, and very useful messages also. There'll be a lot of messages in this conversation for employees who are listening to to the conversation. Employees of different organizations, what is their role? How do they need to add value? How to be innovative, how to support businesses in this situation. And I think this is a very, very important conversation that I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from. I wanted to pinpoint one research that ACCA and IMA did back in 2016. um, 2016, nobody was probably thinking about disruption. People were thinking about smooth sailing and all, and then all of a sudden, the Internet of Things and those disruptions that Mr. Riaz has talked about, they started coming in. If you go through that report, it talks a lot about innovation. It talks a lot about risk management. Talks a lot about things that Mr. Riaz has discussed today. So, that's exactly why, we call these sessions thinking ahead. And that backdrop, if you see, of the galaxy, of gazing the crystal ball, that, also fits in very well with the kind of discussion that we did. So if you people get time, do visit the ACCA website and look for this report on ACCA IMA innovation and ERM partners in managing the waves of disruption. Um, Very interesting read, and I'm sure you'll benefit a lot, and you'll see a lot of the conversation that we are having today. It traces back to the report that ACC had produced back in 2016. Mr. Riaz, thank you very much for taking time out. I understand it's very, very critical time for you all as well, for your organization, for you as an individual, as a lead for NIBAF. Thank you very much for your very precious time, for your very precious and relevant thoughts. We thoroughly enjoyed the session, and I'm sure a lot of participants also did, and some very relevant questions coming from the audience also. So I'd like to thank all the people who were viewing it live, and also all the people who will probably view it in their leisure time. So thank you very much. And I would also want to mention two of my colleagues who were sitting backstage and managing this entire show. Rashid, who's our marketing manager from our Karachi office, and Ali Shan, who's our business development manager sitting in Islamabad, who has been in contact with Mr. Riaz and had the agreement from him to come in and do this discussion. Thank you very much, both of you as well. And sir, thank you very much once again. We will, inshallah, continue to work with NIBAF. You mentioned the literacy program that ACC is working on. So yes, we have this very keen desire of working with the government organizations, with your particular organization also, and delivering value to different regulators and stakeholders at this moment. Thank you very much. Any closing message from your side, Mr. Riaz, and then we'll call it off.
I think I'll just like to thank Harun, you and your team, and all the participants who are participating, and the people who ask questions on this. So with ACCA, I think State Bank as well as NIBAF is working on various forums to work together. And one of the project is actually the National Financial Literacy Program, which is where we are having some e-modules. So do visit the NFLPY website, and if it's for different age groups, it's something which gives a very good financial literacy, and it is in a gaming form. So it will be very interesting for you and your brothers, sisters, siblings to work on those things. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and stay safe